current news podcast.
With Elu and Jessie.
Yes. All right, diving into some fascinating and honestly kind of unsettling stuff coming out of Russia. Specifically, how their state-run media is reacting to Zelensky's recent trip to the U.S. You sent over this piece from the Daily Beast by Julia Davis, published just yesterday, the 25th, and wow, real eye-opener. Before we even get to Zelensky, though, the whole tone, it's shifted. Remember those early days before the invasion? It was all victory parades, talk of Ukrainians greeting Russian troops, like with open arms. Can you believe it?
Right, almost surreal when you think back to it. There's that quote from, what was her name? Natalia Makieva, analyst, claimed Ukrainians would welcome the invasion with sweet bread and flowers. Talk about a prediction that hasn't aged well.
Miscalculation of epic proportions, wouldn't you say?
You say that again.
And this Daily Beast article, it really highlights how drastically things have changed. Now they're facing what journalist Maxim Yusin, he calls it a forever war. Can you imagine turning on your TV, hearing that from your own government? That's got to rattle some nerves.
Absolutely. And Yusin, he's not some fringe voice. He's well respected in Russia. So when he says forever war, it carries weight.
Yeah.
Not just talking about the military conflict itself, but the broader picture, the political, economic, even the social consequences Russia's facing.
Now, this forever war comment, it's not just tanks and trenches. You're saying it's about the future of Russia, the whole thing.
Exactly. This decision to invade, Yusin's arguing it's fundamentally changed Russia's path. And not for the better, obviously. He even outlines some potential consequences. You've got increased international isolation, that's a given, severe economic strain, and of course, Russia standing on the world stage, gone. These aren't just abstract concerns. These hit the everyday Russian hard.
And it's not just Yusin. This article mentions other figures.
Yes.
People typically aligned with the Kremlin, now they're openly expressing doubts, like Dmitry Sitin, for example. Makes you wonder, are these cracks in the facade? Is this dissent, or at least this unease, is that becoming impossible to contain even within Russia?
It's possible. Definitely possible. These are people who've publicly supported the Kremlin line for years. And now even they're expressing reservations. That's got to mean something, right? It suggests the reality of this forever war, these consequences that Yusin's talking about. They're starting to hit home, even among those, well, you could say within the system.
And it's not just the long-term, what happens 5-10 years from now that's causing anxiety. This Daily Beast piece, it also highlights this growing fear within Russia. They're afraid of Ukrainian strikes on their own soil.
Right.
Think about that for a second. This supposedly mighty military power. They seem pretty unnerved by the thought of retaliation, don't they? What does that tell us about how they really see their position?
I think it really points to a deep insecurity. The opposite of that image they've been trying to project this whole time. The narrative of a swift and decisive victory, that's gone. They're facing a Ukraine that's more than capable of defending itself. And as we're seeing, more than capable of taking the fight to Russia, this was not part of the plan they sold their people. And that realization, well, let's just say it's causing some serious unease.
Yeah, no kidding. And speaking of plans gone sideways, the article mentions this moment, almost darkly comedic when you think about it, where Vladimir Solovyov, and if you don't know, he's one of the most prominent pro-government TV hosts, known for, well, intense isn't even the word for his rhetoric. But anyway, he actually advocates for cutting off electricity to Ukraine. And he's not even just talking about military targets. He specifically mentions nurseries and kindergartens. Can you believe that? Nurseries? I mean, where do you even start with that?
I think it's a chilling illustration. It shows just how far the propaganda has gone, It's not about winning hearts and minds anymore. It's about collective punishment, trying to break the spirit of the Ukrainian people through sheer brutality. And what I find particularly disturbing is how Solovyov tries to frame this. Like it's just a necessary measure,
Yeah.
A way to bring order, as he puts it. But of course, order in this context, what does that even mean? It's a euphemism for control, for imposing their will through force. The human cost, well, that seems secondary at this point.
It's wild, isn't it? It's like they're saying, we'll plunge your children into darkness, and that'll make them love us.
Huh?
Just mind-boggling.
And what's even more concerning, Solovyov, he's not some lone wolf out there, He's a highly visible figure on Russian state TV. His words, they have weight. People listen. This kind of rhetoric, this willingness to inflict suffering on civilians, just as a means to an end, it reveals something. A dangerous mindset within the Kremlin, I'd say. A dangerous dehumanization of the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, incredibly bleak.
Yeah.
And as if all that wasn't enough, the article throws in this whole other layer to the story of the upcoming U.S. election. Turns out Russian state TV, they seem to have a clear favorite, Donald Trump.
Why is that, you think? What are they hoping for from a potential Trump presidency?
It seems like they view Trump as someone more likely to be sympathetic to their position, someone potentially open to, cutting a deal that benefits Russia, even if it means, well, even if it comes at Ukraine's expense. Yeah. So they're hoping for a repeat of 2016, basically. Right. I think Trump might just pull back U.S. support for Ukraine. Give him a free hand, is that it?
It's a possibility, and they seem to be clinging to it. Don't forget, this is a regime that thrives on propaganda, misinformation. They need to maintain a semblance of control, even when things are clearly not going their way. And how do you do that? You promote the idea that your preferred candidate, someone you see as beneficial to your cause, might be on the verge of a comeback. It's a way to sow doubt, to offer a glimmer of hope, even if it's an illusion, to make people think things might still go their way.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And kind of disturbing, too, the way they're trying to shape the narrative at home and internationally. Clinging to this hope of a Trump presidency, but at the same time, pushing this idea of a forever war. Seems like a contradiction, doesn't it?
Maybe on the surface, yeah. But look closer, dig a little deeper, and you see how these two narratives, they actually work together quite effectively.
Really? How so?
Think about it. By painting this picture of an endless, unwinnable war, they're trying to wear everyone down, trying to create this sense of fatigue, this feeling of inevitability, hoping that the West, the U.S. in particular, might be more willing to say, okay, enough is enough. Pressure Ukraine into accepting concessions just for the sake of peace.
Ah, so it's about managing expectations then. They're trying to convince everyone, even themselves maybe, that a Russian victory or something close to it is the only way out.
Exactly. It's classic propaganda, shift the goalposts. Yeah. The initial justifications for the invasion, those are gone, right? Debunked, most of them. So now they're focusing on just ending the bloodshed however they can, even if it means, well, rewarding their aggression, essentially.
And that's where Trump comes in. They're hoping he'll be more open to this whole let's just make it stop argument, even if it means Ukraine loses.
It's a gamble, but they seem willing to take it. Remember that quote from the article sent chills down my spine when I read it? It's not about whether they're waiting for us or love us. We just have to bring some kind of order there. Otherwise, they will keep jumping at us. Arrogance and misjudgment, that's this whole conflict in a nutshell.
It's like they haven't been paying attention this whole time. The Ukrainians are fighting for their survival, their right to exist. And this idea that Russia can just, waltz in and bring order, it's delusional.
It's this deep-seated sense of entitlement, this belief that they can dictate terms to their neighbors. It's astounding. And the forever war narrative, that's what's so dangerous. It plays into that entitlement, makes a negotiated surrender seem like the only way out.
So where does that leave us? It's clear things in Ukraine, they're far from resolved.
Yeah.
And if this article is anything to go by, the Kremlin's still clinging to these narratives. Narratives that are, misleading at best.
What's important for all of us is to recognize these narratives for what they are. Attempts to manipulate, to control, this deep dive into their media, it's given us a glimpse behind the curtain, It reminds us to think critically, question everything, especially in times of conflict, right?
Absolutely. You've given us a lot to think about today. Easy to get caught up in the headlines, but as we've seen, there's always more to the story. By taking the time to understand these narratives, anxieties, even the contradictions, we gain a much deeper understanding of this conflict. And that's what matters.
Because in the end, this isn't about geopolitics. It's not about military strategy. It's about real people, people whose lives are being torn apart by this war. It reminds us that even now, the impact of conflict, it echoes, sometimes for generations to come.
Turn the dial to the daily news. Turn the dial to the daily news. Turn the dial to the daily news. Bringing voices, headlines, and shoes. You turn the dial to the daily news.